The mask never comes off. I wake at the third bell to the sound of prayers echoing from the vox grills built into every wall of my hab block. The Emperor protects, they say. The Emperor judges, they say. The Emperor knows. But I know something they do not. The Emperor does not patrol the lower spires of Hive Tertius with a shock maul crackling at his belt and a bolt pistol heavy in his hand. The Emperor does not walk among the unwashed masses who spit and curse when they think no one can hear them. The Emperor does not see the hatred that burns in their eyes when they look upon his servants. I am Arbitrator Kael Morn of the Adeptus Arbites, and for 23 years I have been the law in the shadow of dying stars. My precinct covers 6 levels of the mid-spire, from the manufactorum districts where the air tastes of rust and sweat, to the merchant quarters where guild lords count their thrones behind armored glass. 3 million souls call this sector home. 3 million potential criminals. 3 million reasons why the Imperium endures only through fear. The carapace armor is ritual. Each piece has been blessed by Chaplain Voss, anointed with sacred oils, and inscribed with the litanies of justice. The gorget bears the skull and scales of our order. The pauldrons carry purity seals that flutter like dying moths in the recycled air. The helmet seals with a soft hiss, and suddenly the world becomes filtered through red-tinted lenses and the constant whisper of vox static. I am no longer Kael Morn. I am the law incarnate. I am fear given form. The shock maul hangs at my right hip, its power cell humming with barely contained energy. A touch of the activation stud and it could shatter bone, stop a heart, or cook a man's brain in his skull. The bolt pistol rests in its holster like a sleeping predator, each shell in its clip capable of turning a human torso into a crater of meat and splintered bone. These are not tools of justice. They are instruments of terror. And terror, I have learned, is the only language the masses truly understand. My first patrol begins before dawn in the Manufactorum district. The great machines never sleep, their rhythm a constant heartbeat that vibrates through the metal floors and into the bones of every worker. Steam hisses from coolant pipes. Sparks shower from welding stations. The air shimmers with heat and chemical fumes that would burn the lungs of anyone not born to breathe poison. Here, in the bowels of the hive, they make the components that keep our world alive: weapons parts, vehicle engines, the 10,000 pieces that comprise a single lasgun. They work 18-hour shifts and sleep in bunks stacked 6 high, and they hate us for it. I know they hate us because they cannot hide it completely. A worker pauses at his station when I pass, his hands trembling as he reaches for a welding torch. His supervisor, a scarred woman with oil-stained coveralls, watches me from the corner of her eye while pretending to inspect a gear assembly. A child, no more than 12, drops the tray of rations she was carrying and scrambles to clean up the spilled gruel while shooting glances in my direction. Fear radiates from them like heat from the forge fires. But underneath the fear, deeper and darker, I can feel the hatred burning. They hate us because we represent everything they can never be. We eat real meat while they subsist on protein paste. We live in private chambers while they crowd together like animals. We carry weapons while they may not even touch a knife without permit. We are the enforcers of a system that grinds them down until they are nothing more than cogs in a machine that does not know their names. And we do it not because we must, but because we can. The first incident comes at the shift change, when 10,000 workers flood the corridors like water through broken pipes. The crowd moves with practiced efficiency, born of necessity and fear. No one speaks above a whisper. No one makes eye contact. No one wants to be noticed. But today, someone stumbles. He is old, this worker, 60 years or more, though in the hive such age is nearly impossible to reach without augmetic assistance. His left arm has been replaced with a crude mechanical substitute, and his eyes are clouded with cataracts from decades of chemical exposure. When the crowd surges around him, he falls. Nothing more than an accident, a moment of clumsiness brought on by exhaustion and age. He falls, and his mechanical arm strikes the ferrocrete with a sound like breaking bells. I could help him up. Any decent human being would help him up, but I am not human. I am the Arbites, I am the law, and the law does not show mercy to those who disrupt the peace. My shock maul is in my hand before I realize I have drawn it. The power field crackles to life with a sound like angry insects. The old man looks up at me from the floor, and I see something die in his eyes. Not hope. Hope died in him years ago. What dies is the last vestige of his dignity. Move along, I command, and my voice carries the authority of 10,000 years of imperial law. The crowd parts around the fallen man like oil around water. No one helps him. No one even looks at him. They have learned that to show compassion is to invite suspicion. To help the fallen is to risk falling yourself. The old man struggles to his feet, his mechanical arm whirring and clicking as servos strain against his weight. He does not look at me again. He knows better. He rejoins the crowd and is swept away like debris in a flood, and I holster my maul with a satisfaction that tastes like ash. This is what order looks like in the Imperium. This is what peace costs. One old man's dignity is a small price to pay for the compliance of 10,000 workers. Or so I tell myself as I continue my patrol. The merchant quarter is different. Here, the air is cleaner, filtered through expensive purification systems and scented with exotic incenses. The corridors are wider, the lighting warmer, the floors covered with imported carpets that cost more than a worker's lifetime wages. Guild merchants in fine robes conduct business behind reinforced glass while their private security watches from the shadows. These people do not hate us, they fear us, but it is a different kind of fear. It is the fear of those who have something to lose. A commotion draws my attention to a spice merchant's stall. Two men in guild colors argue with a woman whose clothes mark her as mid-hive nobility. The dispute appears to be over the price of saffron, that golden spice worth more than gold itself. The woman claims she has been overcharged. The merchants claim their prices are fair. Voices rise, accusations fly. In the lower hive, such a disagreement would already have ended in bloodshed. Here, they look to me for resolution, not because they trust my judgment, but because they fear my power. The woman expects me to side with her because of her station. The merchants expect me to side with them because of their guild connections. Neither understands that I will side with whichever option best serves the Imperium's interests. The spice in question is indeed overpriced, but only by the standards of the last century. Inflation is a constant in the Imperium, driven by endless war and the logistics of feeding a galaxy-spanning empire. The merchants are within their legal rights to charge whatever the market will bear. The woman is within her legal rights to refuse the purchase. Both are wasting my time with a dispute that serves no one but their own petty pride. The price stands, I declare, my voice carrying through the sudden silence that falls over the market. The woman's face flushes with indignation, but she does not dare argue. The merchants bow respectfully, but I see the relief in their eyes. Justice has been served, though no one is entirely satisfied. This too is the way of the Imperium. Perfect justice is impossible, but perfect compliance is achievable through the application of sufficient force. As I walk away from the spice merchant's stall, I catch a glimpse of something that stops me cold. A child, no more than 8 years old, watches me from behind her mother's robes. But it is not fear I see in her eyes. It is curiosity, wonder, perhaps even admiration. She sees the armor, the weapons, the symbols of authority, and she is not afraid. She is impressed. For a moment, I remember what it was like to be that child. I remember the day an arbitrator came to my school to speak about law and order. I remember the awe I felt as he spoke of justice and duty and service to the Emperor. I remember how proud I was when the aptitude tests marked me for Arbites training. I remember believing that I would make the galaxy a better place. The memory fades as quickly as it came, leaving only the taste of bitter irony. I nod to the child, a small gesture that sends her scurrying behind her mother's skirts. Even wonder can be dangerous in the wrong circumstances. Even children learn to fear those they once admired. My patrol continues through the residential sectors. where families crowd into hab blocks designed for half their number. The walls are thin, and privacy is a luxury few can afford. I hear fragments of conversation as I pass. A woman weeping over an empty ration card, a man cursing the foreman who work him 16 hours without break, children crying for food that will not come. These are not the sounds of rebellion, they are the sounds of despair. And despair, properly managed, is as useful as fear in maintaining order. At the intersection of Hab Block 7 and the main transit corridor, I encounter my first real challenge of the day. A crowd has gathered around something, their voices raised in the kind of excitement that makes my hand drift toward my weapon. As I approach, they part before me like smoke before flame, revealing the source of their agitation. A man lies dead in the corridor. His throat has been cut with surgical precision, and his blood pools around his head like a crimson halo. His clothes mark him as a mid-level administrator, the kind who processes work assignments and food distributions, the kind who decides who eats and who goes hungry, the kind who makes enemies simply by doing his job. Murder in the hive is not uncommon. In a population of millions packed into spaces designed for thousands, violence is inevitable. What makes this case interesting is not the death itself, but the way the crowd reacts to it. There is no grief, no shock, no calls for justice. There is only a grim satisfaction that speaks of long-nursed grudges finally settled. I kneel beside the body, my armor's sensors recording everything. The cut is clean, made with a blade that was both sharp and steady. The angle suggests someone of medium height, probably right-handed. There are no defensive wounds, which means the victim either knew his killer or was taken completely by surprise. The murder weapon is nowhere to be found, likely discarded in one of the refuse chutes that honeycomb the hive's structure. Who found the body? I ask, my voice amplified by the helmet's voxcasters. A woman steps forward, her hands clasped nervously before her. She is perhaps 40, with the prematurely aged look common to hive dwellers. Her work clothes mark her as a factory supervisor, someone with just enough authority to be trusted with small responsibilities. "I did, Lord Arbitrator," she says, using the honorific that protocol demands. "I was returning from the night shift when I saw him lying there. Did you see anyone else in the corridor?" "No, my lord. The transit ways were empty except for the usual traffic." Her answers are practiced, too perfect. She is lying, but not necessarily about anything important. In the hive, people learn to lie to authority as naturally as they learn to breathe. Truth is dangerous. Lies are survival. I look at the crowd that has gathered around us. 24 faces, all carefully neutral, all desperately trying not to appear involved. But I know that at least half of them know exactly who killed this man. They might even approve of it. In their world, justice is not something dispensed by the arbiters. It is something taken by those with the courage to act. "This man was murdered," I announce, my voice carrying across the corridor. "The killer will be found and punished according to Imperial law. Anyone with information is required to come forward immediately." The silence that follows is absolute. Not one person speaks, not one person volunteers anything. They stand there like statues, their eyes fixed on points just past my shoulders, waiting for me to leave so they can return to their lives. They will not help me find the killer because they do not see the killing as a crime. In their minds, justice has already been served. Under Imperial law, I have several options. I could order mass interrogations, using pain stimulators and truth serums to extract confessions. I could implement collective punishment, reducing the ration allocations for the entire sector until someone comes forward. I could simply execute a random selection of the crowd and let fear do the work of justice. Any of these options would likely produce results. Someone would confess, or provide information, or simply be tortured until they said what I wanted to hear. The case would be closed, the killer punished, and order restored. That is how the system is supposed to work. But as I look at these people, these downtrodden masses who work themselves to death for the glory of an empire that will never know their names, I find myself asking a question that has no place in an arbitrator's mind. Do they deserve justice? Or do they deserve mercy? The question is heretical. The law is absolute. The Emperor's will is incontrovertible. My duty is clear. And yet, the question lingers as I seal off the crime scene and begin the routine of filing reports that no one will read and conducting investigations that will lead nowhere. That evening, I return to my chambers in the Arbeits precinct house. The building is a fortress of black stone and steel, its walls covered with icons of justice and images of the Emperor's wrath. Here, surrounded by the symbols of my calling, I should find comfort. Instead, I find only the weight of another day's compromises with a system that grinds human dignity into dust. My quarters are spartanly furnished: a bed, a desk, a weapon rack, a small shrine to the Emperor. On the wall hangs my commission, signed by Sector Judge Vex herself, authorizing me to act as law and judge within my designated area of authority. Beside it hangs a mirror, and in that mirror I see the face of a man I no longer recognize. 23 years of service have carved lines around my eyes and turned my hair gray at the temples. 23 years of enforcing laws that serve only to maintain a status quo built on suffering. 23 years of telling myself that order is worth any price, that peace justifies any brutality, that the Emperor's will excuses any cruelty. I remove my helmet and set it on the weapon rack beside my bolt pistol. The shock maul goes into its charging cradle, where it will spend the night building power for tomorrow's violence. The armor plates are cleaned and oiled with ritual precision, each piece blessed and stored according to regulations that have not changed in 10 millennia. In the mirror, without the armor, I look almost human, almost like the man I was before I swore my oath to serve the Emperor's justice. But that man is gone, consumed by years of compromises and small cruelties. In his place stands something else, something harder, something colder, something that can look upon suffering and call it necessity. My dinner consists of protein cubes and recaf, the same meal I have eaten every night for longer than I care to remember. As I eat, I review the day's reports on my data slate. 3 minor infractions processed with summary fines, 1 public disturbance resolved through intimidation, 1 unsolved murder that will join the thousands of other unsolved crimes in the precinct's files. Another successful day in service to the Imperium. But success feels like failure when measured against the faces I saw today. The old man who fell in the corridor, the child who looked at me with wonder before learning to be afraid. The crowd that stood silent around a dead administrator, their silence speaking louder than any confession. These are the people I have sworn to protect, but protection in the Imperium means something very different than it does in the stories told to children. Sleep comes hard, filled with dreams of faceless crowds and empty corridors. I dream of the mask that never comes off, even when I try to remove it. I dream of voices crying for justice in a language I have forgotten how to understand. I dream of a young man in training fatigues, proud to serve the Emperor's will, not yet understanding what that service would cost him. I wake to the sound of prayers and the weight of another day's duty pressing down on my chest like a gravestone. The second day begins with an alarm klaxon that splits the dawn like a blade. Riot in Sector 12. All units respond immediately. The voice of Watch Commander Brashen crackles through the Vox network, calm and professional despite the chaos erupting 6 levels below my position. I am dressed and armed within minutes, muscle memory guiding me through the ritual of preparation, carapace armor blessed and sealed, shock maul charged and ready, bolt pistol loaded with mass reactive shells designed to punch through heavy clothing and bone with equal efficiency, helmet locked in place, transforming my vision into the red-tinted perspective of the law incarnate. The riot lift carries me down through the hive's layers like a drop of blood through arteries of steel. Each level tells its own story of decline. The upper spires gleam with polished metal and filtered air. The middle levels show the wear of constant use but maintain the pretense of civilization. The lower reaches grow darker, more crowded, more desperate with each passing floor. Sector 12 occupies the boundary between the manufacturing districts and the deep underhive, where those who have nothing left to lose make their homes in the shadows. Here, the ceiling presses down like the lid of a coffin, and the air tastes of rust and despair. The corridors are narrow, designed for utility rather than comfort, and lined with hab blocks that house families of 8 in spaces meant for 2. As the lift descends, I can hear the riot growing louder, voices raised in anger, the crash of breaking glass, the rhythmic chanting that turns a crowd into a mob and individuals into something far more dangerous. By the time I reach Sector 12, the sound has become a roar that vibrates through the metal decking under my feet. The scene that greets me is controlled chaos. 2 squads of Arbites have formed a cordon across the main thoroughfare, their riot shields locked together in an unbreakable wall. Behind them, enforcer units wait with shock prods and gas dispensers. Above, on the maintenance gantries, snipers track targets through the scopes of long-last rifles. Everything is ready except the order to fire. Watch Commander Brashen stands behind the shield wall, his own armor scarred by decades of such conflicts. He turns as I approach, his helmet vox crackling with static. "Report," I demand, taking my position in the formation. "Food riots," he replies, his voice carrying the weary tone of someone who has seen this play out too many times. The protein shipment was contaminated. 3,000 ration packs had to be destroyed. The locals are not taking the news well. Through the gap between riot shields, I can see the mob that has gathered in the plaza beyond. Perhaps 200 people, maybe more, pressed together in a heaving mass of bodies and raised fists. They wave makeshift banners bearing slogans that would be treasonous if anyone bothered to read them. They chant demands for food, for justice, for someone to care that their children are starving while administrators feast in climate-controlled offices high above. At the front of the crowd, I spot the leaders. A man in factory coveralls, his augmetic arm raised like a banner of defiance. A woman with the bearing of a former Guard veteran, her voice carrying over the noise as she directs the mob's anger. A priest of some kind, though not one sanctioned by the ecclesiarchy, preaching about the emperor's love for the downtrodden. These are not professional agitators or trained revolutionaries. They are ordinary people pushed beyond their breaking point by a system that sees them as expendable components in a machine too vast to comprehend. They are dangerous precisely because they have nothing left to lose. Demands? I ask, though I already know the answer. Replacement rations, compensation for the contaminated food, investigation into how the contamination occurred. Brashen's tone suggests what he thinks of such requests. Standard riot response? Standard riot response involves tear gas, shock prods, and enough violence to scatter the crowd and arrest the leaders. It is efficient, tested, and guaranteed to end the disturbance within the hour. It is also guaranteed to leave dozens of civilians injured or dead, their only crime being hunger in a system that cannot afford to feed them. I study the crowd through my helmet's optical enhancers, watching faces twisted by desperation and rage. These people are not my enemies. They are citizens of the Imperium, subjects of the Emperor, human beings whose only failing is existing in a galaxy that has no place for human dignity. But they are also a threat to order, and order is the foundation upon which civilization rests. Hold position, I command. I want to hear what they have to say. Brashen's helmet turns toward me, and I can imagine the expression beneath the faceplate. In his experience, listening to rioters only encourages more riots. The law is absolute, and mercy is weakness. He has been an arbitrator longer than I have, and he has learned that the only language the masses understand is violence. But I step forward anyway, my boots ringing against the metal decking as I approach the line of riot shields. The crowd sees me coming, and their chanting falters as they recognize the symbols of ultimate authority emblazoned on my armor. Here stands not just a policeman, but the living embodiment of imperial law. Here stands someone who could order their deaths with a single word and face no consequences beyond a minor entry in his daily log. Citizens of the Imperium, I begin, my voice amplified by external speakers to carry over the crowd's murmur. You have assembled without permit in violation of civil order statutes. You have raised your voices in seditious chant. You have disrupted the peace that the Emperor demands of his subjects. The crowd stirs uneasily, but they do not disperse. The leaders stand firm, their eyes fixed on my helmet's red lenses. The man with the augmetic arm steps forward, his mechanical fist raised in defiance. "We demand food for our children," he calls out, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "We demand clean water. We demand the basic rights promised to all citizens of the Imperium. We demand justice for the corruption that poisoned our rations while the nobles feast in their towers." His words are technically treasonous. He has accused imperial officials of corruption without evidence. He has claimed rights that exist nowhere in imperial law. He has demanded justice from a system that recognizes only obedience. Under the Lex Imperialis, I could execute him where he stands and face no questions beyond a routine inquiry. Instead, I find myself asking, "What would you have me do?" The question surprises everyone, including myself. It is not the response of a proper arbitrator. It is the question of someone who still remembers what it means to be human. The augmetic man blinks in confusion, his mechanical arm wavering. Behind him, the crowd mutters uncertainly. They had prepared for violence, for the brutal suppression that always follows dissent in the Imperium. They had not prepared for someone in authority to actually listen. "Investigate," calls out the former guard veteran. "Find out why our food was poisoned. Punish those responsible. Replace what was destroyed. Treat us like human beings instead of cattle to be managed." Her requests are reasonable. More than reasonable. They are exactly what any decent system of government would provide as a matter of course. They are also impossible within the rigid hierarchy of imperial administration, where questioning a superior's competence is tantamount to heresy and admitting error is seen as weakness. I stand there for a long moment, surrounded by the weight of expectations I cannot meet. The rioters expect justice that I am not empowered to provide. My fellow arbitrators expect decisive action to restore order. The system expects me to choose between mercy and duty, knowing that mercy is not an option for someone wearing the skull and scales of the Adeptus Arbites. The choice, when it comes, feels inevitable. Disperse immediately, I command, my voice carrying the full weight of imperial authority. Return to your homes and workstations. Resume your duties as loyal citizens of the Imperium. This gathering is illegal and will not be tolerated. The disappointment in their faces cuts deeper than any blade. They had hoped, despite everything, that someone in authority might listen to their pleas. They had believed, for just a moment, that the system might show compassion for their suffering. Now they understand that hope itself is a luxury they cannot afford. The augmetic man's shoulders slump in defeat. The veteran woman shakes her head sadly. The unsanctioned priest bows his head in prayer for souls trapped in a system that has forgotten how to forgive. One by one, they begin to turn away, their dreams of justice dying in the recycled air of the lower hive. But not all of them leave. A core of perhaps 50 remains, the most desperate of the desperate, those who have already lost everything and have nothing more to fear. They link arms and begin to chant, not the angry slogans of before, but something softer, something that sounds almost like a hymn. The Emperor protects, they sing, their voices blending into harmony despite the harsh acoustics of the metal corridor. The Emperor provides, the Emperor loves his children. It is a song I learned as a child, taught in the scholars to instill faith and obedience, but in their voices, it becomes something different. It becomes an accusation, a reminder of promises that have been broken and faith that has been betrayed. They sing not of the Emperor who rules from his golden throne, but of the Emperor who supposedly cares for the lowest of his subjects. Watch Commander Brashen steps up beside me, his hand resting on the grip of his shock maul. "Orders, arbitrator?" The words stick in my throat like broken glass. These people are guilty of nothing more than believing the lies we tell children about the Imperium's benevolence. They are singing hymns, not seditious chants. They are praying, not rioting. but they are also defying a direct order from legitimate authority, and defiance cannot be tolerated regardless of its form. "Gas them," I whisper, the words barely audible even to myself. "Sir, deploy tear gas," I repeat, louder this time. "Disperse the remaining crowd. Arrest the leaders for incitement to riot." The order passes down the line like a disease, contaminating everyone it touches. Enforcer units move into position, their gas dispensers ready. Snipers adjust their aim to provide covering fire if the situation escalates. Medical teams prepare for casualties. The singing continues, even as the first canisters arc through the air and explode in clouds of choking white smoke. The hymn does not falter as men and women begin to cough and weep. They continue to sing even as their voices grow hoarse and their eyes stream with tears. The Emperor protects. They chant through the chemical fog, their words a challenge to everything I represent. The Emperor provides. The Emperor loves his children. The gas does its work with ruthless efficiency. Bodies collapse, overcome by the toxic cloud that burns their lungs and blinds their eyes. The few who try to run are caught by enforcer teams and beaten to the ground with shock prods. The leaders are dragged away in neural restraints, their augmetics sparking as the containment fields disrupt their mechanical components. Within 10 minutes, the plaza is empty except for the unconscious forms of those who had sung hymns while authority broke their bodies. The riot is over. Order has been restored. The system has proven once again that it will not tolerate even the gentlest form of dissent. I stand in the settling gas cloud, breathing filtered air through my helmet's purification system, and try to tell myself that I have done my duty. The law has been upheld. The peace has been preserved. The Emperor's will has been enforced through the application of appropriate force. But the song lingers in my memory, a haunting melody that speaks of faith betrayed and hope abandoned. The Emperor protects, they had sung, even as his servants prepared to gas them into submission. The Emperor provides, they had believed, even as their children starved in the depths of the hive. The Emperor loves his children, they had proclaimed, even as his justice fell upon them like a hammer upon flesh. As I walk back through the empty corridors of Sector 12, past the hab blocks where families huddle behind locked doors and pray that the violence will not find them, I begin to understand something that 23 years of service had failed to teach me. We are not the police of the Imperium. We are its executioners. We do not serve justice. We serve order. And order demands that hope be crushed before it can take root in hearts that have learned to expect nothing but suffering. The mask never comes off because the mask has become the face. The armor never comes off because beneath it lies nothing but shame. The law never bends because it was never meant to serve anyone but those who benefit from its rigidity. And in the depths of the hive, where the lights grow dim and the air grows thick, 3 million souls continue their daily struggle against a system that sees them not as citizens to be protected, but as problems to be managed. The Emperor protects. The children learn to sing in school. But down here, in the darkness where the Emperor's light cannot reach, we are the ones who decide what protection means. We are the police of Warhammer 40,000, and we are everything that is wrong with the universe we claim to serve. The third day brings no alarms, no riots, no immediate crises demanding the application of sanctioned violence. Instead, it brings something worse. Routine patrol through the hab blocks where yesterday's defeated rioters have returned to nurse their wounds and plan their quiet acts of rebellion. The aftermath of suppressed dissent has a particular texture to it, like the air before a thunderstorm but without the promise of cleansing rain. People move through the corridors with hunched shoulders and downcast eyes, but their silence carries an electric charge of barely contained fury. They have learned that hope is dangerous, but they have not yet learned to stop hoping. I walk among them in my armor of black ceramite and contempt, the skull and scales of the arbites catching the pale light of overhead lumens. My footsteps echo off metal walls covered in decades of grime and neglect, a percussion that announces the arrival of authority in places where authority is synonymous with pain. At the intersection of Corridor 7 and Hab Block Delta, I encounter my first test of the day, A woman sits on a folding stool beside a makeshift stall, selling items that skirt the edges of legality. Recycled water filters that may or may not work. Protein bars of questionable origin and even more questionable nutritional value. Electronic components salvaged from industrial waste and repurposed for civilian use without proper imperial certification. Under the letter of the law, her entire operation is illegal. The goods are unlicensed, the stall is unpermitted, and she lacks the proper guild memberships required for commercial activity. I could arrest her, confiscate her merchandise, and sentence her to 6 months of penal servitude without requiring anything more than her presence in this place at this time. But she is not alone. 3 children sit behind her stall, sharing a single portion of gruel from a battered metal bowl. Their clothes are patched and repatched, held together by thread and desperation. Their faces show the hollow-cheeked look of chronic malnutrition. Their eyes carry the particular brightness that comes from hunger that has lasted so long it has become a constant companion. The woman herself might be 30 or 50 or anywhere in between. The hive ages people in ways that make chronology meaningless. Her hair is streaked with premature gray. Her hands show the calluses and chemical burns of factory work. Her eyes hold the exhausted resignation of someone who knows that each day survived is a small victory against impossible odds. She sees me approaching and begins to pack her goods with the quick efficiency of someone who has done this many times before. There is no panic in her movements, no desperate pleading for mercy. She knows the law as well as I do. She knows that what she is doing is illegal. She does it anyway because the alternative is watching her children starve while following regulations designed by people who have never wondered where their next meal will come from. "Citizen," I call out, my voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. She stops packing and looks up at me with eyes that hold neither fear nor hatred, only tired acceptance of whatever fate I choose to dispense. "Yes, Lord Arbitrator, your permit for commercial activity. It is not a question." We both know she has no permit. Permits cost money, require guild sponsorship, and involve background checks that would reveal her connection to yesterday's riot through her husband, the man with the augmetic arm who now lies unconscious in a detention cell 3 levels below. "I have no permit, my lord." Her honesty is either refreshing or damning, depending on perspective. A more experienced criminal would lie, produce forged documents, or at least attempt to bribe their way out of trouble. She simply states the truth and waits for judgment to fall. I look at the children behind her stall. The eldest cannot be more than 10. The youngest still has the soft features of infancy, despite the hunger that has already begun to sharpen her cheekbones. They watch me with the wariness of animals that have learned to fear predators, ready to run but too tired to move quickly. Under imperial law, I have not just the right but the duty to arrest this woman. Her crime is clear, her guilt established by her own admission. The sentence would be automatic: confiscation of goods, administrative fine equal to 6 months' wages, and imprisonment until the fine is paid. Since she obviously cannot pay such a fine, she would remain in custody indefinitely, her children left to survive on their own or enter the care of imperial orphanages that are little more than training camps for industrial servitude. This is what justice looks like in the Imperium. This is how order is maintained. This is the system I have sworn to uphold and defend. I reach for my shock maul, my fingers closing around the familiar weight of sanctioned violence. The woman's shoulders tense, but she does not flinch. She has made her choice and accepted its consequences. Her only concern now is for the children who depend on her illegal enterprise for their survival. But as my thumb hovers over the activation stud, I find myself looking not at a criminal but at a mother whose only crime is loving her children more than she fears the law. The shock maul remains in its holster, my hand falling back to my side with a weight that feels heavier than ceramite and steel. "Pack your stall," I command, my voice carrying none of its usual authority. "Move to a different location. Do not let me find you here again." The woman blinks in confusion, her hands frozen in the act of wrapping a water filter in recycled cloth. Behind her, the children look up with expressions of bewildered hope. This is not how encounters with the Arbites are supposed to end. "My lord?" she whispers, as if afraid that speaking too loudly will break whatever spell has stayed my hand. You heard me. Move along. She does not question the mercy she has been shown. Experience has taught her that gifts from authority are rare and fragile things, easily broken by too much scrutiny. Within moments, her stall is packed and she is hurrying down the corridor with her children trailing behind like a line of refugees fleeing disaster. I watch them disappear into the maze of side passages that honeycomb this section of the